Hey guys, Samuel the Aviator here, and in today's video I wanted to address something that you guys have been asking me about for a couple weeks now, so I wanted to take the time today and address it in this video. And that, of course, is my instrument rating. As you guys have known, if you've been following my channel for a while, you know that I've been working on my instrument rating, and I was hoping to have it done quite a bit earlier than now, but I am excited to announce that as of about 2 weeks ago, I did pass my instrument check ride. And the purpose of today's video is kind of to tell you guys about my experience of my instrument check ride, kind of what I went through, and also give you guys some tips along the way if you guys are working on your instrument rating. So hopefully it's going to be interesting for everybody, whether you just came here for an update on my journey of getting my instrument rating, or if you came here to learn how to ace that instrument check ride. I'm going to be hopefully explaining everything and going to be making it interesting for everybody. So stay tuned, it's all coming right up. Alright guys, first thing I wanted to talk about was my mission and the reason why I chose to pursue my instrument rating. So there were a couple of reasons, and one of the first reasons was that I am pursuing my commercial license and maybe going on to AGP sometime in the far future, because I'm only 18 currently. But I want a career in aviation. And that entails obviously getting an instrument rating. Now I could have gotten my commercial first and then my instrument, but it really didn't make sense because I needed to build 250 hours anyway, which I'm very close to 250 hours right now. I'm not sure if I have 250 or not quite yet, but I know I'm very close, and I would have to have been building hours anyway, and I wouldn't really have been gaining anything. Plus, you're restricted to daytime flights within 50 miles of your departure airport if you are doing commercial flights without an instrument rating. So the only jobs you're really going to be getting is skydiving, maybe pipeline if it's close, but you're really restricted if you don't get that instrument rating. And the other reason that I went after my instrument rating was because of the safety factor. Now I know there's a lot of debate on the safety of an instrument rating, and I haven't looked at the accident statistics as far as whether having an instrument rating lowers the crash rate at all. I think insurance companies still like it if you have an instrument rating, and your insurance will be a little lower than if you don't. But I can see both sides of the argument, because on the one hand, if you have an instrument rating and you're flying VFR and accidentally get into IMC, you can get out a lot easier if you have that IMC experience, and you'll be a lot safer, and you shouldn't have as many issues than if you're a VFR only pilot with no IMC experience and you accidentally fly into clouds. You're probably going to get disoriented and possibly crash. So that's on the one hand. But on the other hand, you have pilots who get their instrument rating and now they're flying in very, very poor weather conditions, and they're flying beyond the capability of their aircraft. They're flying in ice and all sorts of things that they're not really supposed to be doing, and that could cause the accident rate to go up. So I'm not sure what the statistics show, but on a whole, I believe it's safer to have an instrument rating. And it's also the third reason I have an instrument rating, and I got it, is because with an instrument rated plane such as the Aztec behind me that has a 430 WASP, it's got DME, it's got de-ice boots and hot props, it's a capable aircraft. And if I did not have an instrument rating, I couldn't take advantage of all its capabilities. And that's not to say I would fly this in ice or anywhere near a thunderstorm or any of those conditions. It's just that if I had a lower overcast day or if I had a cloud layer I need to get through to travel to my destination, if I'm a VFR pilot, I might not go. And if I have an instrument rating and a more capable aircraft, that just opens a lot more doors for me to rely a little bit more on general aviation as a mode of transportation. It's still not a guarantee, and it's not like driving where you know if you leave you're most likely going to get back exactly when you want to. Or commercial airline transportation, that is definitely more reliable than general aviation, but it still will open more doors for you than if you're a VFR only pilot. So I just want to talk a little bit about my check ride experience and everything that I experienced during my check ride, and then I'm going to, towards the back half of the video, I'm going to talk about specifics, how I studied, what I used, and how I prepared for my check ride. So if you guys are waiting for that, please stick around to the back half of this video, or skip to it. I'll put timestamps in the description so that you guys know where you need to go if you're looking for any specific information, but I would encourage you to watch this whole video. There should be educational content throughout. So my check ride, I felt, was a little bit longer than most check rides are, or at least my private. I shouldn't say most check rides, but it was longer than my private check ride, and that I'm sure is due to the fact there's a lot more to cover. And it's also due to the fact that I think my DPE was very thorough, which I do appreciate because it makes you feel like you earned it a little bit more. So my check ride was scheduled for 11:30, and I actually did not take it here at Holmes County. I took it down at Fairfield County where I've been training at. So I flew down there in the morning. I got there at about 10:30, and my DPE was supposed to show up at 11:30. He was a little bit late, so we got started at probably 11:45. So I went down there, I set everything up, got my FAR aim, my logbook, my payment for the DPE, IACRA, everything that I needed, I had down there and ready for when he showed up. And then we obviously had the usual small talk, what's my name, where I'm from, what's my journey in aviation, what's my end goal, and things like that all DPEs are going to first start off on just to put the students at ease. After that, I gave him his payment and we got into the oral. The oral, I think, took around 2.5 or 3 hours. I'm not 100% sure. I wasn't just staring at the clock, but it definitely took quite a while. And I finally got through my oral, and then we took a short break. I went to the bathroom and got the plane ready, got a briefing, and then we went and did all of my approaches that we needed to do and my unusual attitudes as well. So we finally got back, and I think I started my check ride at 11:45. I got done, I think completely done at 4:30. And when we had all the paperwork and everything finished, it was near 5:30 till I actually had the certificate in my hand. So it's definitely an all-day event. It took a while, and it may just be that instrument ratings take a lot longer than private did, but I remember my private was basically all done that morning. I think I started at 8:30. At noon or 1 o'clock, I was ready to go. So that was my experience with it, and I'm definitely super excited now that I have the rating I've got done. It was definitely a struggle at times to stick with it and work on that, constantly keep doing the same thing, going out, building time, doing approach after approach after approach, and perfecting it. But I'm super happy that I stuck with it, I worked on it, and I passed on my first try. I'm very excited about that. So I'm going to switch gears a little bit now and talk about specifically what I did to prepare myself for the check ride and how I passed. So hopefully if you're interested in that, you're going to stick around. All right, so I want to talk how I studied and how I prepared for my check ride. So I obviously got my written test out of the way as early and as possible once I felt ready. I got an 88% on that, which I'm super excited about. I feel that was a good score, especially on a difficult test like the instrument written exam is. So I'm super happy with my test score. And then how I studied is normally I work during the week, but on the weekends, particularly Saturday, I would still get up early-ish. I would get up at about 6 a.m. normally. I would go to my local coffee shop, and this is something that I would recommend for you guys because there's obviously coffee shops in every town anymore. And I would go, I'd bring my books, I'd bring my notebook, and I'd bring my laptop, and I would just sit there and study normally till about noon. So I'd study for 3 or 4 hours in the morning, Saturday morning, preparing for my check ride, and then I would go out and I would do my lesson with my instructor Saturday afternoons, and then in the week, sometimes I'd have a day off from work to work on my instrument rating. So I'd try to keep it around 2 times a week. Sometimes it'd only be 1 time a week that I'd actually have a lesson with my instructor. But on the days I had lessons, I would still get up like I would during the week, maybe a little later, like 6 a.m., and I would go study for my check ride, and then I would go do my lesson, and I try to study what we were doing that day, if we were doing specific maneuvers, specific approaches, try and study that as well as the whole check ride. So that's something that I did, and another thing that I found that helps terrifically for studying is if you have an actual paper notebook. So this is my notebook here that I use. It's my personal notebook, so I do have more in here than just my instrument training. and Checkride Prep, but this is what I use, and I would highly recommend that. So as you can see here, I've got, on this page, I've got my Checkride Prep, and this is just everything that I felt weak on. So I would generally go flying, and I'd keep an eye on how my performance was, or I would go through online ground school and Checkride Prep, and anything that I didn't feel that I had the answer ready for, that I could answer without stumbling or trying to think too hard, I would study that. So as you can see, I have everything written down that I felt like I needed to study more on to be more proficient at it, and then once I finished, I would put a check mark beside it. And that's one method I used. Also, I just wrote down some random tips on here as I'm going along, and I would watch YouTube videos for my instrument check ride on other people's experience. Also, I had King School's Checkride Prep for their practical exam, which I highly recommend. And I would just, anything I learned that I was like, oh, I hadn't heard that before, oh, that might be helpful towards my check ride, I would write down in my tips. I found that writing down figures and math equations, everything like that, it helps because you remember it more. So I have written down here service volume of a high and low VOR, as well as a terminal VOR, a CDI. I've got here how to figure your distance from the radial, some other stuff on here. So just everything like that you want to be aware of. Another huge thing that my examiner talked quite a bit about, and I think most examiners do, is how your instruments work. So I made sure to go through and look at exactly how does my airspeed indicator work, how does my heading indicator work, how does my turn and bank work, how does my altimeter work, how does my VSI work, and I obviously took notes of all of that while I was working on it. So I'll put that back there. So I obviously took notes of that. Also, what happens if your pitot tube gets blocked but your drain hole doesn't, your static port gets blocked, everything like that. There's just a lot to know for your instrument rating, but make sure you know that stuff, how your instruments work. That was a big one for me as well. Also, I'll just touch briefly on make sure that you know weather systems, weather fronts, icing. He had me give him 2 different weather briefings in different states and different weather systems, as well as a weather briefing for our flight. So make sure that you know weather very well. Obviously, it's a huge talking point because it's IFR. You're going to be in weather. So make sure you know weather very well. All right, some more stuff just kind of in the tips category. Make sure you have a personal minimums sheet worked out. I actually did have a personal minimums worked up for my private. Luckily, my examiner didn't ask me about it, and I am a very cautious person naturally. But for my instrument rating, my instructor made sure that I got a personal minimums sheet worked out. Excuse me. And I also put VFR stuff in here as well, so I do have now VFR personal minimums as well as my IFR personal minimums, and my instructor, my DPE did go over all of my personal minimums for a IFR flight, as well as if he was asking me different scenarios, if the weather is this, are we going, and what types of things are we going to look for. And I was able to say, well, if the ceiling's only 50 foot above a precision approach minimum, I'm not going to go on that flight because I want it to be at least 200 feet above that. So he's going to make sure that you're actually abiding by your personal minimums, even in theory. So make sure that you work out a personal minimum sheet and you stick with it. Another tip, I use these books for my private pilot, and I also use the instrument oral exam as well. It's by ASA, Oral Exam Guide. They have a private pilot instrument, and I'm sure they have commercial and everything, CFI probably. These books are amazing. They just basically ask every single question that could possibly be asked by an examiner during the oral portion, and they'll give you a clear, concise answer. And I wouldn't recommend memorizing it, but go through it, make sure that you understand the questions asked as well as the answer, and if you cannot make a more detailed explanation, or at least understand that detailed explanation they have in here, study that subject. That way you'll be very well prepared for your check ride. Another thing that I did that I think a lot of people do, but I think I'll just throw it out there again. Obviously you want to bring your FAR aim, and I've got mine tabbed out basically to the max. So what I've got here, I've got part 1, which I don't really think there's anything important there. It's just definitions and abbreviations. Then I've got part 43 here, and I also show maintenance, so I know what part 43 is about. And you can look here in the, if I can find it, in the contents, but as you can see, it takes a while to do so, and then you've got to find everything else. So if you read everything that's important to you and then have it tabbed so you know exactly where it is and what you need to know. Like part 61, that applies to the certification for pilots. So you can look in here if you need to know anything there. Part 68 for basic med. Part 71, that's just airspace stuff if you need to look in there. Part 91 is all your rules of operation. And then part 91 is standard instrument procedures. And then I also have the AIM tabbed out. So I've got the different chapters and just what they're about. Navigation here. Airport lighting, airspace, air traffic control. See what this is, traffic procedures, emergency, weather, medical. So if he asks me something and I'm not exactly sure what the answer is, it's basically guaranteed it's going to be in the FAR AIM. So I can say, hey, I'm not quite sure. I think this is what the answer is, but I can look and make sure, and then just go straight to what section that's going to be in, whether it's in the FAR or the AIM. You've got it tabbed out. You can look real quickly, real easily, and press the examiner because he's going to see that you know where the stuff is. You've got it all prepared. They really like organization. So that's something I did. Obviously, tab out your logbook. That's pretty self-explanatory. All right, I think about ready to wrap this up. The last thing that I did to study for my instrument rating was if you go on, I believe it's My Pilot's Cafe. I'll throw the link down in the description below. I'm not exactly sure what the name is, but it's basically an instrument Checkride preparer worksheet. And basically it's all the rules, regulations, and everything you need to know in like 4 pages. Just question, answer, and all the regs that are applicable to you. So I really recommend going through that, reading and memorizing basically everything that's like a reg, stuff you need to know. So I would highly recommend that. All right, just some last minute tips and tricks. Don't make your examiner dig too hard for stuff. And he actually mentioned that to me before I started the check ride. He wants you to come out with a full answer and make it clear, full answer. Don't make it overly short that he's got to keep digging for stuff. Although you don't want to make a huge, long answer, go down a rabbit trail and show what you don't know. Still don't do that, but he was like, look, don't make me dig for stuff all day long because we're going to be here a long time. If I ask you something about a subject, tell me what you know about it and we'll move on. If I see an area of deficiency, we'll talk about that a little more. And obviously if I find you're really, really deficient in something, we'll perhaps have to go back and you're going to have to study with your CFI some more before you come back for your check ride. So that's what he told me on that subject, and thankfully I didn't really have too many issues. He said I did very well on my oral. And I think I had a little issue with icing. I also didn't know what my Class Bravo VFR minimums, visibility and ceiling requirements were. So I just had that on my knee board. I was like, look, I've got my knee board here. I know all of my requirements are on here. I could just glance at that. And he's like, that's fine. So that's what I did. Just things like that. Also, one other thing that I wanted to mention is the IFR flight portion of the check ride is pretty self-explanatory. Basically, you go out, do 3 approaches, and then you do unusual attitudes, and he can also throw some more things in there if he wants to. That wasn't really difficult. The ILS went good, and then you do a non-precision approach without your primary instruments, so without your attitude indicator and your heading indicator, and he also failed my tablet on that as well. So that was something, and I also didn't get my DME, I barely got my DME set up in time for that approach, so that almost failed me. So make sure that you understand all your approaches and how to do them, and practice partial panel approaches as well for your non-precision approaches and unusual attitudes. And that's about it. There's not much to say on the flight portion. Just make sure you have your approaches practiced and that you're good at them, and you know what to do, obviously, for lost comms in case he simulates that, and all your other things that you need to practice on. Alright guys, that's about it for today's video. I'm sorry that it's such a long video, but I just wanted to give my subscribers an update on where I am and that I did pass my instrument check ride. So obviously I'm super stoked for that. Hopefully this gives everyone a little bit of motivation if they're struggling with their check ride, or if they're coming up on a check ride, they want to learn, some last minute tips or how I studied for it and how I passed it on the first try. So hopefully this was enjoyable for everybody, and if you could, please give this video a like. That really helps out my channel. Also, if you found this content informative, interesting, entertaining, please drop down below this video and click that subscribe button. My name's Samuel. I talk about aviation. I do aircraft reviews, gear reviews, I do vlogs, and also content like this. So if you enjoyed it, please make sure to subscribe to my channel, ring the bell next to that, you'll get notified every single time I upload a new video. And lastly, if you want to, please drop down in the comments. I love to hear from you guys. Let me know if you've got a check ride coming up, what that check ride is, how you're preparing for it, and I would love to be answering those comments. I really enjoy reading all the comments, and I try to answer all of them if I can. Alright guys, I think that wraps up today's video. I will see you guys in my next video. See ya.